What does the enemy want to have happen? And how can we use the strength that we have as believers to battle him so that he doesn't even get started? I moved to Mexico in 1997, so the story I'm going to tell you is in 2011. I'd been there at that point for a long time. And I was familiar with the rhythms of the city, the way that everyone went out for tacos when it got dark, and soccer tournaments started at 9 o'clock at night. And I felt in every way so shocked when in 2011 the cartel war in our city was so significant. Nobody was eating tacos at night and nobody was playing soccer. And if you're not eating tacos and playing soccer in Mexico, there is something going on. In fact, our city was really right at the crossroads of a cartel war. And that year, almost 2,000 people were assassinated. And so I had a pastor friend who was telling me that one Sunday he was teaching in his service, and an elder came up and passed him a note that said, "The chief of police is in the building." And my pastor friend was really excited because he had had a prophetic dream a few months beforehand. And in that dream, he dreamt he was praying over a big group of police officers. At this point, the whole city knew we were losing about 23, 24 officers a month. Their lives were being lost. And he asked his wife when he woke up, "Do we even know an officer?" And she said, I don't know any police officers. And so the idea that God had brought one of them into his building was very exciting. And so he told him about his dream and said, "Could I come to the police station and pray over your officers? I feel like the Lord gave me a vision to do so." And the guy was like, "Well, I just got here. You probably know that your police chief was murdered last week. And I mean, I don't really know any of the officers very well, but I've never met anybody in this week that I think would be interested in your prayer. So I'm not sure that's going to work out." But my pastor friend was really insistent and eventually convinced him. And he said, "Okay, fine. I'll give you 5 minutes. You can say whatever you want to say, pray, whatever you want to do." So on a Saturday, Salatiel, my pastor friend went there, and for 5 minutes he just shared the basics of the gospel, and everyone stood at attention. It wasn't like anybody raised their hand or cried or anything, but when it was over, he was really excited because he felt like he did what God had asked him. And he said to the chief, "Can I come back next week and do it again?" And he's like, "Because it went so well? Like, I mean, no, you didn't even get a response." He's like, "But I feel like that's what God wanted me to do." That continued all through the winter of 2011 into the beginning of 2012. And the police chief said, "Okay, I believe you. I think something is probably happening that we can't see with our eyes." He said during this month, there was not a single officer's life lost. And not everybody in the police station even liked what my friend was saying or was responding to what they were saying, but they definitely liked the fact that nobody had died. So they were like, "Whatever you got, keep bringing it, because I want more of that here." And throughout the spring, like March, April, May, June, July, this one particular suburban subdivision, that police force was having unprecedented victory. In fact, they had had more arrests than the National Guard that was there, and people were starting to pay attention. By the fall of 2012, people were playing soccer and eating tacos at night again because some of the unrest had died down. And they had a new mayor in this community. And the mayor called some of these folks into his office, my pastor friend, the police chief, some other community leaders, and said, "One of my first political acts is I'm supposed to give the keys of the city to somebody. And I'm sure it's one of you people, but I don't know how to pick between you. So I really want you to self-select who would like to represent the work that you've been doing now for the rest of the city." And my friend was like, "You'd like to know who deserves credit for what's been happening in our community, and that's who you want to give the keys to?" And the mayor said yes. And he said, "Well, that's Jesus Christ." And the mayor goes, "You want one of my first political acts to be that I'm going to give the keys of the city to Jesus Christ?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, that's who deserves it." And so that's what happened in the fall of 2012. This mayor gave the keys of the city to Jesus Christ.
César Garza Villarreal, Presidente Municipal de Ciudad Guadalupe, a nuestro Señor Jesucristo.
And the community, they went crazy. I mean, they cheered for almost 8 minutes straight. And by the end of 2012, all these surrounding communities in our great big giant city had given their keys over to Jesus Christ. And the church had begun to minister in the most chaotic places of the city. And it made national news. Not everybody even understood what was happening, because when revival is going on around you, you feel it, but you don't even totally know it. People knew something was going on, and that's been almost a decade now, and you can still feel the effects of the spiritual shift that happened in our city. And I think what happened in my life in the aftermath of the revival of Monterey was it galvanized my faith that there is always more going on than what I see with my eye. We have an enemy, and his desire is to disrupt God's kids doing God's work in God's house. He doesn't want us to have any of that reconciliation, renewal, restoration. And Ephesians chapter 6 says that we're to put on the full armor of God. And 1 Peter 5 says we have an enemy, and he's like a lion, and he's roaring around, and he wants to devour us. The problem is when I sew those teachings together, it makes him feel like I'm supposed to put my armor on and wait for the lion to come get me. But why does he get to come get me? If I already know everything he's going to go do, I don't want him to come get me. I want to go punch him first. Like, I want us to be in a spiritually aggressive posture, not a spiritually defensive posture. Asking what would the enemy want to have happen, and what can I do proactively, preemptively, spiritually in this space or in this relationship. And when I realize that I have that kind of power now that lives inside of me, I don't have to be afraid of anything. And if something seems dark, heavy, broken, hopeless, those are some of God's favorite places to go. And in the biblical stories, we see over and over again that God called his kids into really dark places and tells his very best stories in places like that. And so I now am looking, I now have eyes to see and feel drawn to those kinds of storylines, because I know that God is going to do something more than I could ever ask and imagine. And all he asks for me in the middle of it is that I'm obedient and give him credit.